April 20th, 2026, right at 6:20 a.m., very early. And this is chapter 14, and I'm leaving off from where I left off. So, Heavenly Holy Spirit, Mother of God, be with us, please, because this isn't intended to hurt anybody, especially my babies. There's no intention to hurt anyone. It's just to tell my story and clear this for me and hopefully help them see the reality of how corrupted these systems can be with domestic violence orders, DVs, and especially when they're combined with a divorce matter. And this is how it gets complicated, because it does. But if you're listening, I appreciate you. These are only my opinions. And let's pick it up where we left off, loves. So I had went down to from Pueblo to Maxwell with Albert, and I'd given everyone written notice 2 weeks in advance that I was going to go down and inventory my property that was awarded me by Judge Kennelly. And so I gave everybody 2 weeks notice in writing, Mike, the sheriff's department, everybody, and the courts. And I told them, hey, I'm just going down to take inventory, film it, so I can figure out what kind of a truck I'm going to need to transport it. So I go down there with Albert, all anxious with my CPTSD and my trauma. And we get there, and it was a Sunday. And I figured that way, nobody's going to school, the kids aren't coming and going, and you know, that's the best day to go. You know, they could just go away for the day, you know, while I go and film, and then I'll go away. Well, I get down there early in the morning, and I'm waiting. And I called him in advance. I said, hey, I'm coming. And John Valdez, an officer that I knew in Raton, came and said, hey, you're going to have to wait until 3 p.m. in the afternoon until Officer Martin comes on duty with the Sheriff's Department about 3. I'm going, great. It's 9. We got to go kill 6 hours, Albert. I know I just wanted to come down video and get back home, but we're going to be here for a distance. Sorry, dude. So Albert and I went driving around like I'd said in chapter 13. We came back about 3. And Officer Martin, who bought my mobile home on Brilliant Street with his wife and 3 kids, beautiful. And he says to me, I can't let you go to the property. I said, well, why? He says, well, because you have this domestic violence order and it's in conflict with your divorce matter, your DM order, or your DM case, your divorce matter case. And I said, wait a minute, you know, I gave, according to, you know, even the DV and the divorce matter, I gave him plenty of notice that I was just coming down. 2 weeks. And I said, I just need to video. I'm not taking anything. I just need to video and inventory my property. He says, well, you know, it's Sunday and it would be a court matter. And, you know, Albert and I couldn't stay. It was already stressful enough already. So, like, okay, this DV order's getting in the way, and he just keeps extending and extending and extending me. Though I wasn't threatening, I hadn't even been in contact with him at all. I was up in Pueblo. And so, and he had the kids at that point. I'm like, okay, you know, I lost everything through the courts. They sided with biased for Mike every single time. Now, I got things in the divorce that maybe I could have reestablished my life with the property after 25 years of marriage. You'd think I could have got something, anything. I had my home. I had my property, things accumulated over 25 years. It was quite a bit of inventory. that I did get awarded what there was of it. And they said, no, you can't see anything, you can't video. I'm like, right, okay, another stump. So we go back home, drive all the way back up, nothing to show. And I'm trying to communicate with my daughters through letters to their therapist in Las Vegas. And I'm writing these really nice letters, and I'm getting some emails back from my kids. Just having a little bit of community. That's it, just letters. And then Mike goes to the therapist in with the DV order, I guess, and tells the therapist, I'm not even allowed to write letters. I'm not allowed to write letters. She's not allowed. I have the order. The order says she's not allowed. So the therapist, obviously, she's going to believe him. Okay, great. Now, any communication I got was taken away, according to this DV and Mike Ledoux's authority, which he did with everybody. And it was an atrocity. And I guess at that time he needed to sell his Challenger, his 2016 that I bought with him, to get something differently. And yeah, he would communicate with me so I could help him sell his car. He gave me $2,000 for my interest, which it was a lot more than that. And he scribbled on the check, thank you. What a mean dude. Oh my God. And, wow. Yeah, as long as it served him, he was willing to communicate with me. But you see, this is the problem with the DVs, loves. Domestic violence orders, is that it totally eliminates your ability to communicate. Now, we're bearing in mind I was going through a divorce, right? Well, he didn't have an attorney, and I couldn't call him to negotiate anything for this divorce that we were going through, too. And the domestic violence order, which I was never violent at all. I wasn't calling anybody, I wasn't harassing, I wasn't going there, I wasn't getting involved with his, nothing. And now I couldn't even write letters to my kids. So I was left absolutely in the dark, but these domestic violence orders got in the way of me even be able to defend myself in my own divorce case. I couldn't request evidence, I couldn't write him or email him or nothing for anything to be on my side. I was totally cut off from everything. It was an atrocity. And I don't believe that DVs are appropriate for anything. It keeps you from any communication. And they can just keep extending and extending and extending. And all of the officers, even when I went in at one point for when he said, she killed my bird in the hearing. This was Officer Oliver in the DV court. And I was just asking for my First and Second Amendments to be able to speak, to be able to communicate. Look, this is inhibiting my ability for communication. And I have a right to my free speech and to say what my perspective anyway. And they violated me or extended me at that point, this DV. Like, she murdered my bird, and Oliver said, I'm going to regret you said that because that was an atrocity. They would have me locked up if I murdered my bird Delphi, who I had for 20 years out the shell. God almighty. And if Mike had given me my little Casita and my Bronco too, Delphi would have been safe. But my son comes out and says, no, you don't get anything, when I went to go there and get it to protect me. So I was totally denied any protection, any communication, anything. Yeah. And I didn't have any money. I couldn't obviously hire an attorney to help me. So the DV shut me out completely, and he used it to the umpth degree. To the umpth degree. Absolutely. Cruelty. And you have a divorce, but because of your domestic violence order, even though I was all the way in Pueblo, I couldn't hurt him at all from way up there. I'm living so far away, and I was never threatening. The only person that got hit was Joey. I never hit Mike. I never broke things. I didn't intimidate him for his VA check. He was supposed to give me half his back pay when he got some back pay. Did you think I saw anything? No way. No way. Of that money. Who knows where that went to? Probably my son Lucas Ledoux. And because Mike had told me a year before I left that Luke was planning behind my back to get my money. I didn't want to believe that, but in retrospect, hey, anything's possible at this point. I don't want to say my son did that, but hey, it's pretty obvious. My son wasn't defending me. My son was on my ex-husband, not his dad's side, who was Jeffrey Robert Bowers, but on Mike's side and totally against his mommy. Wouldn't even talk to me. And he could have if he wanted to, but he didn't. In fact, he was the one that came out and said, 999. No, you can't get anything until after the divorce. It was weird. That was when I asked him, why do you hate me so much? Because you made me go to church. Good God. Which in retrospect I get. Because, churches can really mess up your head. And the DV orders kept me from everything. And they just kept extending and taking Mike's side and taking Mike's side. And, okay, she wants her First Amendment. Violate her. She wants her Second Amendment. Violate her. Just to protect my right to have my freedom of speech, not to hurt anybody. And my attorney, Terrence Cam, took that all. Well, you were in there screaming about your First Amendment, your Second Amendment, and they took offense. I said, wait a minute. I'm an American citizen here, aren't I? Well, yeah, but I'm trying to exercise my rights here. And nope, Oliver extended me anyway, even though she heard what he said about my bird, Delphi, that I murdered him or her. I'm not sure if Delphi was a boy or a girl. That's why I called Delphi a Phi. Anyway. So they kept extending me and he's using this DV against me. And on these DVs, he even falsified official police report. And the officer said, because I called at one point, I heard that my son Lucas had been murdered. And I called, and I think it was Springer PD. And I said, hey, I caught wind that my son Lucas might have been murdered and put in a chipper. And he says, where'd you hear this from? I said, well, I can't tell you my source, but I'm worried. I was really super scared. And so he went down to check. And I'm not sure if he went to 701 Spruce Street in Raton that Lucas owned, or if he went to 409 Tanaja Avenue in Maxwell, New Mexico. I wasn't sure, but he called me back and he said, no, he's okay, he's fine. I said, great, oh God, that was a relief. The things that were going through my mind, you want to know. So the next time the DV order came up and Mike dragged me into court, to extend it yet again, he said in the police report, I had reported I had caught wind that my son was murdered and put in a chipper. Okay? And that's what I read, the police document, the report, and that's what it said. Now, Mike put a document on top of the police report because he had to write, what his reasons were for extending this DV. And Mike wrote that she called the PD and said that I murdered my son and I put him in a chipper. And so he added words to an official police report, which is against the law. And I reported that to the court. Hey, uh, that's not okay. He's falsifying police documents now, falsifying reports. And I had called the school just to see if my girls were attending, just to see if they were attending. And I called politely and I said, hey, I'd like to know if, Dixie and Carrie Ann are attending. And the lady said, well, I can't give you any information. You'd have to go through the courts to find that out. She asked me, are you the parent? And I said, yes, I am, but I don't have custody. And she said, well, you'll have to call the court and, and they can, take it from there. I said, okay, thank you. I'll do that. But when Mike wrote it down on the DV, he said I was threatening and I was demanding and I was rude. And he had said this about Leroy Quintana, who we bought our home from, too. And I was never rude. I have recordings of messages I've left for Leroy Quintana. Bless his heart and soul. He's probably passed on by now. But anyway, and I was never demanding with this lady. And so when it came time for court, when it came time for this DV extension, please forgive me. I'm so sorry. I'm a work in progress still. But we're winning. We're getting there. He called supposedly this secretary I had been demanding and rude and, so mean with. And they couldn't produce her. He brings in the principal. Now, I was supposed to bring in Carlos Cordova at that time, I believe. Let me pause for a minute and think. Okay. So yeah, in this hearing, Mike called in the principal of the school rather than the receptionist I spoke to. Well, of course, the principal couldn't speak for the receptionist. She wasn't even in on the conversation. And Mike trying to get people to testify against me untruly, as always before. And I called in Carlos Cordova as my witness, and I subpoenaed him and everything. And I sent in an email. I'd sent it to Mike and Officer Olson with 8th Judicial, Colfax County, Taos, 8th District Court in Raton. And I had sent a subpoena to Carlos Cordova, who received it. But yet they wouldn't allow him to appear for me. They didn't produce my witness. No. And I had spoken to April Jolly the day before this hearing. And I said, well, Carlos Cordova is testifying for me in my DV tomorrow. And she said, we'll see about that. We'll see about that. We'll see about that. Very mockingly. It was really trippy. And sure as all get-go, they don't produce my witness, Carlos Cordova, for me. Officer Olson said he never got my email, which I have it right here on my phone. I didn't get a return to sender on it. And so he didn't get all of the 73 pages I have on my phone. He said he didn't get it. How convenient, right? Which is not unusual with the way they treated me at the 8th Judicial in Colfax County. And so they didn't produce my witness, and of course they extended me. My son Lucas got on the stand and said I wasn't fit to have visitation. And Officer Olson took that as a psychological, or someone who can determine whether someone's fit to have even visitation or letters or communications with their children. But they extended me again and again and again and again, but denied me any witnesses. And I could have freed Carlos Cordova had we been allowed to be each other's witnesses. We wanted to be, but yet when I would call the Colfax County Maldonado Detention Center, they would say he didn't want to talk to me, which was untrue. We were speaking. In fact, Mike accused me of having an affair with Carlos Cordova in jail. And yeah, what didn't he accuse me of? And everybody would just believe him, I guess. But Carlos Cordova was already in jail, accused of something he didn't do with my daughter, Dixie. And there was this gnosis therapy in the 73-page email I sent Mike and Officer Olson. There was this gnosis letter that had accused me of all these atrocities with my daughters. That's in the last chapter. And Mike's shaking this letter at Officer Olson. I want her arrested right now. She did these things to my daughter. It says it right here in Gnosis. I want her arrested. When I was the one that provided that letter, I guess he was ignorant of it too. It seemed that way to me, looking at Mike Ledoux. He was acting all surprised that my daughters accused me of these atrocities. And, wow. Yeah, that's all he ever wanted me. He wanted me arrested so many times. He was so hateful. He was so full of hate. He just wanted me arrested or dead. And it was obvious. I never seen so much hate in somebody and against somebody he was supposed to love 25 years. I couldn't believe my ears. And he just wanted me arrested, and I wanted to know, hey, why would my daughters accuse me so? When, the reason I submitted that was to prove that they were lying about me. Those things never happened. And so I was showing evidence of what, I was being accused. Oh my God. And what the kids were saying behind my back, and I knew that they were lies. That was a fact. And Carlos Cordova had established that. They said my mom never, when they went for that evaluation, of course it came up. Did your mom really do these things? And Carrie Annie said, no, my mom never did these things. No. That they were, she totally denied it because it didn't happen. That gnosis letter, what they said. But they used that letter against me to take my rights away, obviously. And somebody was bribing my children to say these things. That's what I wanted to know. And in one of the divorce hearings, no, it was with Officer Olson, it was the DV. He said, if you could ask your kids anything, what question would you ask them? And I simply said, well, I would like to know, out of that gnosis letter, who was really doing those atrocities to my children? Who taught my kids about Pornhub and watching porno? I said, you could check every device I have. I don't watch porno. I'm not like that. But yet it's saying I forced my children to watch pornography and bribed them to do it, which is an atrocity. And, Officer Olson just shooed it aside. Just didn't pay attention to it, but he asked me, what question would you ask? I said, I'd like to know where my children got these things, where they got these ideas and why they would accuse me. I would like to know why my children would say these things about me. Absolutely. Or why they didn't arrest me in the beginning to get to the bottom of it back in September of 2020. That Gnosis letter came out September 9th, 2020. I have a copy of it right here. And he was offended that I would ask that question. I did want to know where my daughters were getting it from, because I knew at that point that they were getting it from Michael Rubin. And he bribed them to say those things about me or something. Because I didn't get that letter for a long time. I didn't even know about it, but I brought it up purposely. And they, all he was concerned about is you would ask your children that question. Well, wouldn't you want to know, Officer Olson, where your children might get those ideas from, let alone accuse you of them? Well, I guess they thought that was inappropriate. I don't know. I was just trying to get to the truth of it. That's all. At 2618. Yeah. And you see, they don't want me saying these things. They don't want this exposing. How they didn't listen to me when I was proposing. I submitted all that evidence about the house and how Mike was lying about it. I submitted documents. I submitted the Gnosis letter, all kinds of things, written statements. And obviously Michael Rubin got them. Officer Olson, though, was pretending he never seen anything. Not my subpoena for Carlos Cordova, nothing. And so I got nothing at all. Except another extension for this DV order that kept me from any communication, any contact, or anything at all. An atrocity. Yeah, I got a lot of smoke to that one. Because that was awful. And so I got extended yet again. I can't even count how many times now. Well, since 2019, the first DV order was January 2019. So from January 2019 all the way up to the current day, last hearing I had, a few months ago maybe. They just kept extending me and extending me and extending me. That's what happens with domestic violence orders. They just perpetuate them, and it overrides everything. It overrid my divorce and me getting a fair hearing for my divorce, let alone any property. It kept me from communicating with my children, driving by, going by, so I stayed away. Because apparently Mike was making me out to be an imminent grave danger to society. All I did was call the school to see if my kids were going, and I was calling the Leroy Quintana about our house because that was divorce stuff. And he used that against me when I had every right. He said that when I left, he went into default on the house with Mr. Quintana, and so they turned it into a rental. So instead of buying the house, he was now supposedly renting the house. Even though he's in writing, I have letters from Leroy Quintana that Mike is paying the property taxes and that they lowered the payments because I left and I guess financially struggling. And yeah. And so Mike was trying to make it appear like he turned it into a rental, but yet the contract I have with Leroy Quintana conveniently disappeared. But that didn't matter. In the statements that Leroy Quintana submitted to the court, he said that Mike was paying the taxes and eventually he would own that house. Yes. And Mike testified in one hearing that Mr. Quintana cared so much about him and his girls that Leroy was going to give him the house after he passed on. But Mike did that so I wouldn't get any of my home or what it was worth at all. I got nothing but, oh gosh, I can't believe I've lived through it. Mike Ledoux had wished I didn't. Definitely. And I don't know how my son Luke was involved, outside of the fact that I know he never called. And I didn't even know where Lucas was living, if he was living with Mike, if he was in Raton at his property at 701 Spruce Street. I didn't know. I was left totally in the dark, and I had to stay at Bay. Yeah, fitting, Bay Laurel Tree, right? You got to stay at Bay Laurel. Stay away, and I did. I stayed away, you know. The only time I would call was to find out, call Mr. Quintana, find out about my home, and call the school and see if my kids are attending. Boy, I was so threatening, right? I was so threatening. But yeah, because he was a veteran, and he had already manipulated everyone for obvious reasons, because Mike Ledoux didn't want the truth. Not at all. Because it implicated him all the way. And he was so full of hate and anger at me. It was an atrocity. He just wanted me arrested, dead. But it's still hard for me to get that through my head. Yeah, I gotta cough that up a little bit. Excuse me, please forgive me. Yeah, and they let him get away with it. Simply. Going against my First and Second Amendment, any communication whatsoever. And so, and then Carlos Cordova was in the throw, too, and his truth, and his life. And he had already spent 3 years in Colfax County Maldonado Center, accused of, something that my testimony could have changed altogether. My testimony could have changed, especially with that gnosis letter. And him being with my daughters at the time, knowing that they lied, they admitted it to him. And he said Dixie was going to try to stand on that gnosis letter about what happened supposedly at the Days Inn in Santa Fe, which never happened that way. Or they would have arrested me, I guess, if there was any truth to it, really. But it was a lie, and that was going to be testified. And boy, they didn't want that truth. No, they didn't. They did not want that. And just by chance, I had called down twice to the Maldonado Detention Center and had conversations with Carlos Cordova. And he was explaining to me how, oh, please, heavenly help me, this is not easy. It is not, because they wouldn't let him testify for me and wouldn't let me testify for him to get him free. And denied witnesses is against the Constitution, especially when they're the one witnesses that could guarantee your freedom. But they were all on the side of Michael Ruben Ledoux. Now it doesn't matter. He died in a fire, but we haven't gotten there yet. I can say his name. I'm not saying my daughters. Well, I said their name, but anyway, it's irrelevant. I love my children. This was not their fault. And my intention is not to hurt them, but to liberate them. Because my children know the truth of the whole thing. They know the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So help me heavenly. That's all I'm doing, is sharing to maybe prevent somebody else from going through it, and exposing these domestic violence orders and corrupted systems that can be manipulated and held against innocent mothers who wanted to be with their children and have communication, but totally laid off these DV orders. That you can't have a divorce with one because there's no communication. And what happens with that? A lot of lack. And I got the short end of the stick on that one. That's for certain. And when that happened, wow. Yeah, at that hearing, he acted like he knew nothing about it. It was really weird. But it was evidence, and Carlos Cordova was my witness. And I was his for his hearing. And neither one of us had anything to gain out of it outside of our freedom and the truth, and maybe my children's liberation from the clutches of Michael Rubin and his realm. In one hearing with Officer Olson, Mike said, "Oh, so the kids are going to be protected under my realm, under my DV. Yeah, my children are my realm, or under my umbrella." It was a Freudian slip. Wasn't the first time Michael Rubin did it. He couldn't even remember his own birthday. But anyway, yeah, this other time when it was COVID country and we were going through these hearings over Google, that's when Carlos had his first hearing that they didn't even let me in on. They didn't even let me know about it. Otherwise, I would have been there. I didn't even know what was going on. And because of COVID country, it made it really difficult to get any kind of a fair hearing at all. And everything was so different. And everybody had to do things by video. And they had a hurried up jury hearing, I guess, for Carlos. And the way it was conducted, there were so many conflicts of interest in that case. And they didn't allow me to testify, nor even inform me that my daughter had been raped, supposedly, in the first degree. What an atrocity. And I had to find out the hard way, not until 2021, until everything was going on, and they would not allow me. And so I did get to speak with him, luckily, just by winging it. And he told me everything. How the girls admitted that they were lying about me, and how Mike was there all the time in Carlos's ear, and he wasn't supposed to be. Mike wasn't supposed to be visiting the girls but I come to find out he's picking them up from school. He's getting them on the weekends. He's getting them overnights. And when the girls would come back from overnights, they would be having sex in Carlos's house. And according to CYFD, he's not supposed to talk about those things with the doctors and the therapists. Which is really weird, wouldn't you say? I would. It hits me right between the forehead. And his daughter even saw that, and the people were saying to him, I guess CYFD, "Oh, that's natural. Just kind of ignore it." And Carlos is going, "This is not normal. Every time they come back from their dads, they're asking me to have sex with them up the ass. And wanting to take a shower with me. And wow, you'd have to go back to the video that I did, my conversation with Carlos Cordova. But he told me the whole story, and I'm trying to, get down there to see him. And I go down there, and they say he doesn't want to talk to you. He doesn't want to speak with you. And I said, "Well, can you let him tell me that himself in his own words, please? No, he doesn't want to talk to. I said, well, I've already spoken to him on the phone. He's supposed to be my witness. I'm my own attorney. And he should be, and I have spoken to him and we're each other's witness. Why would he not want to? He doesn't want to. Okay, well, you won't put him on the phone to verify that, though. And it just shows the measure of the corruption. Them keeping us apart. And, Mike's going around, the girls driving Corvettes. That's what Carlos Cordova told me. Both the girls have Corvettes. And they have it made driving around, and they got it made, I guess. And so, yeah, he's bribing them with everything, getting them to do these things. I can only use my imagination for everything else he got my poor babies to do with that money, too. Or whatever he was doing, Mike Ledoux. And so they violated us in Colfax County so many different ways. So many different ways. And it destroyed Carlos's life. It destroyed me, too. Really. And they kept me in the dark, absolutely. And him, too, sadly. So sad. And Carlos Cordova had told me that Mike needed a scapegoat so Dixie could get money, or they could get money. I guess this lawsuit through CYFD, or on CYFD, against the state of New Mexico, and them putting my daughters into a home where my daughter supposedly got raped in the first degree. When I was asking them to check her sexually back in 2019. Yeah, begs the question, doesn't it? Really? Begs the question? I know I'm thinking. And they wouldn't let me question anything, ever. That was kind of the problem. Ask no questions. We're just going to do it this way. It's going to happen that way. Or, wow, ask me no questions and I'll tell you no lies, I guess. Not sure about this. And so Carlos got a new hearing. They were trying to get him a new hearing because in COVID country, that was the other Freudian slip that Mike did. The hearing got messed up because of covert. It was covert. No, it was actually COVID. But yeah, what he was doing was covert. Mike Ledoux was doing a covert operation. Bear in mind, he was a 4th ID, 82nd Airborne Ranger, Tigerland graduate, and a recon expert. So if anybody could set me up with expertise and Carlos Cordova, it would be Michael Ruben Ledoux. Totally. And he did it with expertise. And he got his jollies all right. Absolutely. And had everybody believing him or going along with him. And I have some time left. I want to get to the important things. And I have been on and off sobriety for the last 8 years. I am maintaining sobriety. I have clarity right now. But it destroyed me. And anybody who else might be going through a DV, a domestic violent matter, make sure they have real evidence and real testimony. I don't know. I'm not the only one in this show. A lot of people have been affected by CYFD taking bias and these domestic violence orders that don't even give you the ability to defend yourself. Not really. And getting an attorney through a state, well, the attorney's going to do what the state wants them to do. And like with Sarah Barnhart Chavez and Terrence Cam and Corey Darr, they buckled under the pressure. You know, they had to misrepresent me, especially Sandra Barnhart Chavez, because she didn't report the violations that CYFD did against me as far as visiting my children. She did nothing for me, and neither did Tina Lever with ATV. Their hands were tied. And remember, Tina Lever with ATV and Raton told me they're going to give him everything. And boy, she wasn't kidding. She was not kidding. With the law, against the law, no matter what, for some reason, they're going to give Michael Rubin Ledoux everything and put it on you. Wow. Well, me and Carlos Cordova too, sadly, because he got a new attorney. I know I'm kind of jumping ahead here because I was living in Fort Collins, having reverse gastric bypass that almost killed me. Still homeless. I had my RV, so at least I had that, but that was not fun. But hey, I by the grace of the Heavenly and our Blessed Mother Mary, I survived it, really. I'm going to light a double candle on this. Our Lady of Guadalupe wants to be lit for some reason, and we'll do that. And, yeah, I love Our Lady of Guadalupe. That was George Ledoux's, Mike's dad's favorite saint right there, Our Lady of Guadalupe. He belonged to that church in Taos, New Mexico. And so, I was up in Fort Collins, and I had been really sick, and I was finally recovering from it. And Carlos was going to have a hearing. And he told me, and I put it on recording, it's on a video, where you see me talking to Carlos Cordova. And he said, well, you're going to be a witness for me, and I'm going to be, and I'm going to have a new hearing. And he was telling me everything about, well, more about what happened with Mike and the girls, and how, what the girls had said about me, but then retracted that I had done anything, because I didn't. And I said, hey, we have enough on him right now to have him arrested. Between your testimony and mine, Michael Rubin can finally go down like he needs to. The clown. And so I said, okay, Joey. I was with Joey in Fort Collins. And he was helping me. And he stayed, and I flew down to to Raton the next day. This was in 2023. And I flew down there to have Mike arrested. And I was on probation for the Trinidad trespassing. And I called my probation officer and I said, hey, because I had a hearing in Raton for my domestic violence order within a couple days. And so I flew down there, and I did a video in the park I used to take my little girls when they were little. And I stayed there for a couple days, and I went to go see Carlos at Maldonado Detention Center there in Raton. And I sat there, and they would not let me see him. I said, well, we're witnessing for each other. And I went down to Maxwell. That was the first thing I did when I went down there. And then after that, I went up to Maldonado Center. But when I went down there, I called the police ahead of time. I said, I want him arrested. I have evidence right here on my phone. I can show you from Carlos Cordova what has really happened to my children and what that man is really doing. And this police officer that met me there in Maxwell said, "You got to stop. You just got to stop." I said, "I want to do a citizen's arrest on Mike Ledoux for abusing my children." "No, you got to stop. You just got to stop." God. So then I went up to Maldonado Center to see Carlos, and oh no, he doesn't want to talk. He doesn't want to talk to you. He doesn't want to see you. He doesn't want to speak to you. I said, "I was just on the phone with him. Here's, here. I was just on the phone." "No, he doesn't want to talk to you." "No." I said, "Well, can you have him come out here and tell me that, please, to my face?" "No, no, 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 no. Go away." So, okay. I, uh, I, I'm kind of having a hard time here because there was so much to get my head around. Um, and please forgive me. I'm so sorry. Please forgive me. And so I was staying with my friend Marjorie just for a couple days, and I called because my original probation was also in Santa Fe. I was on probation from Santa Fe and for this trespassing. And so I called my probation officer. I hung out for a couple days, went to the church revivals in Raton, there in the canyon, and I, tried to make the best of it. And I wanted to go for my DV hearing, and Carlos had gotten my subpoena, and I went back to Marjorie's, and I was taking a bath, and I was talking to Marjorie on the phone, and she said, "You better leave before you get in any more trouble." And I said, "What trouble?" And she said, "Yeah, there's trouble." And the Holy Spirit came over me and said, "You get out of there right now." And so I never gathered my stuff together so quick in my life. And I jumped in Buzz, and I wasn't going to wait for my hearing the next day. Something was going down. And they were very threatened. Very. And I had to drive through thunderstorms, lightning, tornado warnings, and that's the video that I did where I'm in little Buzz under the cover and trying to get home to Fort Collins. It was a long, long drive. And I made it home, but before I left Raton, I called my probation officer, who I called before I left. And she said, "Oh, Santa Fe is transferring you down there." I said, "Say what?" I said I was going for a hearing. I didn't say I wasn't coming back. I said, "I'm coming back right now. I'll be right there. I'll report to you tomorrow." And she said, "Okay. There must have been some confusion, and they wanted me really bad because they transferred me before 3 days were up. They were trying to transfer me down to Santa Fe, and I knew that if I showed up for my hearing in Raton, they were going to arrest me for violating. Because remember, my probation officer gave me permission verbally, but I didn't have it in writing, which is pinnacle. So I booked it from Raton way back up to Fort Collins to get home. And luckily I did, because my intuition told me that they would have arrested me before I even got that DV hearing. So then I went to the library in Fort Collins the next day to have my hearing, and wow, no witness, no Carlos Cordova, who got my subpoena, nothing. They just extended me again. And they got my son Lucas on the stand. I'm glad I have a little time here because this is pinnacle. It is. And Lucas is on the stand, but I didn't get my witness, man. No, they said they didn't get the subpoena, which was a bunch of, BS. Absolutely. And Lucas is on the stand. Now, this is when he tried to say that I called the secretary at Maxwell School all rudely. And, of course, they couldn't produce her as a witness because she would have had to lie. And that lady wasn't going to do that. So instead, they bring up the principal. And so we had to, Olson had to really disregard that testimony because she wasn't even there. And here they pull up my son Lucas, And I asked Lucas, I said, in the 33 years that I was present as your mother, was I ever physically, emotionally, or sexually abusive with you or your sisters? And he said no. And he told the truth. My son did. Because there was never any proof. And Carlos Cordova would have iterated that truth. But yet, my DV was extended yet again on me in 2023. It was the saddest thing, really. And we're coming up on the end of this chapter, and like I said, there's a lot of things unsaid here, because if I were to put in every detail, we'd be here all year. And I don't want to drag it out any further on me than it already has been. This is really nobody's, well, it's everybody's burden, because what affects me affects everybody. Whatever affects my children affects everybody, because we are all one. And Michael Rubin, he had us all in. Let's put responsibility where responsibility begins. And then, we come up on Carlos Cordova again, because he had a new hearing, and they were supposed to call me as his witness. And this has been going on since Amara Aaron was Carlos Cordova's attorney. And I told her the truth, too, about everything, and no one would take it in. Well, obviously there was a lot of people in the den of sin, led by Satan, which unfortunately has ruled this realm for far too long. And the darkness has gotten this far on, where, testimony is being denied, rights are being denied, witnesses are being denied, and for all the wrong reasons. Because what Michael Rubin Ledoux did to my children only proved how messed up is the system, the judicial system, and all those things going down behind the scenes that they leave you totally ignorant of. Believe me. I know that there's a lot of things I still don't know about. And Dr. Reverend John Paul McGarry told me one day, he said, Laurel Ann, some things you're just better off not knowing. And boy, I get that. Absolutely. Because that's a bigger truth than I can even imagine. And I have a very wide imagination. I do. But I have all the evidence too. On my devices, I've posted the videos. And I'm doing this for posterity, not to gain anything, but in a prayer that this will change things in the air. And these domestic violence orders can be diminished, or finished. Do it another way where the parties can have communication fairly, not biasly. And I'm totally out of the area. I can't even go back to Raton because I'm in fear of my life. I'm in fear of my life, and I don't need to be any more traumatized. I love myself, I know the truth, and I'm standing in my circle of truth, and this is the only way I can say it. And you can transcribe that. This makes it a book, officially. All copyrights reserved. So if you're still listening, bless you, and I hope this never happens to you, loves. Love you.